If it's Wednesday, former President Trump tries to distance himself from Arizona's Civil War-era abortion ban and says for the first time that he would not support a national ban as Republicans play defense yet again on the issue of reproductive rights heading into November. Plus, President Biden warns that Iran is threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel amid reports that an IDF airstrike in Gaza killed a top Hamas leader's 3 sons as talks to reach a ceasefire hit a critical point. And we're following the economic fallout of a hotter-than-expected inflation report as stubbornly high prices roil the market, with the Dow down more than 400 points, putting new pressure on the Federal Reserve's plan to cut interest rates. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Garrett Hake in Washington. As a number of Republicans, both here and in Arizona, are scrambling to distance themselves from yesterday's ruling out of the state's Supreme Court that revived a 160-year-old near-total ban on abortion. And as Democrats once again try to seize on the issue of reproductive rights heading into November, the latest Republican to rebuke Arizona's law, the party's standard-bearer and presumptive presidential nominee.
Mr. President, did Arizona go too far?
Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And as you know, it's all about states' rights. That'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason, and that will be taken care of, I think, very quickly.
What do you think about Florida?
Florida's probably maybe going to change also. See, it's all in what it's the will of the people. This is what I've been saying. It's a perfect system. So for 52 years, people have wanted to end Roe v. Wade to get it back to the states. We did that. It was an incredible thing, an incredible achievement. We did that, and now the states have it, and the states are putting out what they want. It's the will of the people.
A perfect system. This is the first time former President Trump has said publicly that he would not sign a national abortion ban, going farther than he did earlier this week when he addressed his position on abortion without mentioning a national ban at all. Now, the Biden campaign put out a statement in response to that statement saying Trump lies constantly about everything, but has one track record, banning abortion every chance he gets. And that on day one, he will use every tool at his disposal to ban abortion nationwide. This is the latest in an aggressive messaging strategy tying Trump to the Dobbs decision and blaming him for limiting abortion access across the country. Arizona Republicans were even quicker than Mr. Trump to distance themselves from that bombshell ruling. Congressman Dave Schweikert came out against the decision while urging the Arizona legislature to address the issue immediately. Congressman Juan Ciscomani called it, quote, archaic and a disaster for women. Both of them are locked in competitive re-election races. And then there's some state-level Republicans who are also calling for a bill to repeal the law. This decision has left Republican Senate candidate Kari Lake backpedaling too, saying she now opposes the territorial ban despite past comments in favor of it, something her Democratic opponent blasted her for earlier today.
You have flip-floppers like Kari Lake who want to say whatever they can just to get power. And then they expect us to trust them once again that they're not going to put an abortion ban in. In other instances, she said it's called a great law. In other times, she actually cited by the actual statute number that law that basically outright bans abortion and criminalizes providers like doctors and nurses. And now she's trying to run away from it. How can we trust someone like this?
Just there.
A look at exit polling from the 2022 midterms shows you how politically perilous this issue could be for Republicans in this key battleground state. 62% of Arizona voters said they favored legal abortion. 58% said they were dissatisfied or angry over the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. And the issue will likely be supercharged in Arizona this November, as it will be in other states, thanks to a proposed constitutional amendment that's on track to appear on the ballot there, which will effectively give voters a stark binary choice, either the Roe standard of abortion allowed until viability or a near total ban on the procedure. Florida's in a similar position, by the way, with dual rulings from its state Supreme Court last week. Joining me now is our in-house Arizona expert, Vaughn Hilliard, and with me here on set is NBC's Dasha Burns and NBC's chief political analyst, Chuck Todd. So, Vaughn, I'll start with you on the politics of all this in Arizona. The court obviously paved the way for this law, but it won't take effect right away. Is there time for the state legislature to act on this? Is there political will for them to do so?
The answer is that, yes, there is time. The state legislature is just in a matter of figuring out procedurally how they could go about doing that. Notably, if the Speaker of the House, a Republican, this is currently a 16-14 chamber with a Republican majority in the Senate, and in the Arizona House, it's a 31-29 majority for the Republicans. And so now it's a matter of getting enough Republicans on board to somehow overcome even the Speaker standing in the way. And this could potentially, I'm told by two legislators just in the last couple minutes, that there are motions not only by the Democrats, but also a key Republican legislator to bring this up, bring up the repeal of this territorial ban up to the House floor. The question is, are there enough Republicans that will go along with this to ultimately repeal the territorial ban, and which gets at the crux of this has been a tumultuous 24 hours for Republicans, is they are now left to defend a law that all but bars all abortions in the state of Arizona, and even grants a punishment of 2 to 5 years of prison time for those that do provide abortion services, Garrett.
And, Vaughn, obviously we heard a little bit from Ruben Gallego there calling Kari Lake a flip-flopper on this. You have talked to her often about this law over the past couple of years. What has she told you, and what kind of position is she in now?
Right. Let's first go back to 2 years ago. You know, it was notable that back in February of 22, when she was running in a Republican primary for governor at the time, she called it a great law, referring to the territorial ban. Fast forward several months after Dobbs actually overturned Roe v. Wade and made this issue a much more of a real political hot button. Just a couple weeks before that general election, I pressed her again on the territorial ban, and I just want to let you look at part of that exchange. Would you, as governor, urge the state legislature to defend the territorial law that is currently on the books and being defended by the attorney general? And would that also include no exceptions, even in the case of...
Did you just show up to this event? Because I gave a very long answer on abortion there. I talk about it all the time. I've answered this question numerous times.
But why not clarify those questions that I just put
Because
to
we don't know what the law really is right now. We're trying to figure that out. And I will uphold the law, whatever the law may be.
I will uphold the law, whatever the law may be. Of course, it was the Arizona Supreme Court that was determining yesterday which had precedent, that territorial ban or the 2022 piece of legislation signed into law by Governor Ducey that barred abortions after the 15 weeks. And Kari Lake, you heard her there, suggesting that she was trying to obfuscate her own position at the time and not wanting to get into the weeds of exactly where she stood on abortion. But fast forward just yesterday in her statement, and this is the position she has had while running for the U.S. Senate after narrowly losing that governor's race. Her position now is that she opposes the territorial ban and that there should be a consensus that legislators come up with. And that's why people like Kari Lake are hoping that the state legislature actually comes up with a solution, because the other alternative right now, Garrett, is the likelihood that there's going to be a referendum on the state ballot in November in which Arizona voters are going to have the chance to decide and affirm that in the state of Arizona, it's a constitutional amendment, a constitutional right to have abortions up to 24 weeks.
All right, Vaughn, we will talk more about that referendum in a minute, but now I want to bring in Dasha and Chuck a little bit to talk about this some more. So this is an Arizona story today, but it's potentially a national story in the fall. Does this just compound the gender gap problem that Republicans are going to have all around this country right now? Just the fact that this is like day 2 now, where this is the top political story in the country.
Well, the problem for Republicans is that there are a lot of problems for Republicans on abortion. We've seen it time and again, but there is no cohesion right now, Garrett, between what Republicans are trying to message at the national level and what is actually happening in terms of law and legislation and policy and impact at the state level. So Trump can say, I want to be more moderate on abortion. We need to change the way we talk about it. But if women are facing actual consequences that are tangible, that are real, that are happening right now and will be happening through November at the state level, then the rhetoric doesn't matter so much. People are seeing with their own eyes. And we've seen many times when suburban women have been able to swing elections.
But there's not a clean ballot linkage here. I mean, you look at those exit poll numbers we showed at the top in Arizona, where you have these overwhelming numbers on abortion, but Arizona was still one of the very closest states. Like, there's a split there that could be exploited.
And that's a challenge for Democrats. Not every voter I talk to is connecting the fall of Roe, something like the IVF ruling in Alabama, connecting those two things and connecting that to who the actual politicians are that are on the ballot. So what Democrats are going to have to try to do, A, is keep this top of mind constantly because, you know, right now we're having states like Arizona in the news because something's happening. Well, we'll have to see what actually goes on before November, but also make sure that voters are understanding and connecting the dots on all of these issues and seeing how who they vote for, not just on a ballot initiative, but the person, how that could impact this.
To that end, Chuck, I mean, if I slipped Ruben Gallegos some truth serum, does he want the Arizona State House to solve this problem right now, or does he want to see this in November?
Not at all. I mean, you want, because what you really want, you know, there's an interesting here, the people that care the most about access to reproductive rights are actually fearful that the Biden campaign might mess it up, meaning they don't over-politicize it. They know they want 65%. They know there is 60 to 70% support for basically Roe. Okay? They know it in Florida. They know it. But they also know that if you polarize it, you could risk some of that. In Florida, every percentage point matters because you need 60% to get a constitutional amendment passed, not just in its, you know, getting to 55 is easy. I think getting to 60 is pretty easy when it's 6 weeks or Roe.
Right.
Like, for instance, had it been 15 weeks, right, had either the Florida court or the Arizona state courts had said, no, the 15-week laws. And then the choice was 15 weeks versus Roe. Well, then that right of center, 15 weeks is what I call a tolerable number for people. People will tolerate certain things.
You don't rush out into the street over 15
You're like,
weeks.
all right, if that's what you'll give me, I'll take it. But the problem for the Republicans is that isn't the debate.
Right.
Because the elected Republicans in these state legislatures are much further to the right than Republican voters are on this issue specifically, because the guess call them the pro-life community. I know we have all sorts of discussions. What do you call, you know, those that have been advocating for restrictions on abortion? On the state legislative level, it's like their #1 issue.
Right.
Right. So these are true believers. So you're not going to get a compromise out of the legislature in Arizona that's 15 weeks was, in their minds, lenient.
So how does that dovetail with the Trump strategy here, where, like, basically he has to own everything that happens at the state level right now? He politically owns the Arizona decision, just like he owns whatever's going to happen in Florida, which he very notably did not say how he was going to vote on their bill. So how does that work? I mean, you talk about this in your column a little bit.
He did also say that Arizona went too far. Well, if Arizona went too far, then Florida went too far.
So what's the middle ground? Is there a middle ground position that can be taken anymore on this issue?
I don't think, you know, when we had Roe, there was a middle ground. You could talk about restricting late-term abortions. You could talk about parental notification. All those issues are sort of, they've been swept away. So the middle ground now is, I don't think it exists.
It's all or nothing.
We're looking at access versus no access.
Yeah.
Dasha, if we've talked about Florida last week, we're talking about Arizona this week. What are the other states we should be watching where this is going to pop up between now and November?
I mean, there is a growing number of states that are trying to put this on the ballot. You've got Nevada working to get signatures, Montana, Arkansas, Nebraska, Colorado, South Dakota, Missouri, which is actually a perfect example of what you were just talking about, Chuck. Missouri has basically an all-out ban. There was a push about what to put on the ballot. Are we going to put a sort of much more far left, like 24 weeks or beyond, or do we compromise it somewhere around 12 to 15 weeks? Because Missouri's a red state. Like, there are a lot of people pretty conservative. And so, you know, which way are we going to go? The Republicans that were trying to put a 12 to 15 week ballot initiative that were pushing for that, they did not win out. So we are in this place where it's all the way to the left or all the way to the right, and I think that's putting voters in a tough place and, you know, making it difficult for these politicians to walk a fine line.
Just very quickly, this is, I feel like I'm seeing a rerun of Bush 2004. They did it with same-sex marriage, and they were put a bunch of ballots to get rid of to ban same-sex marriage in all these battleground states, and it served to help Bush narrowly get some conservative African-American support, for instance, in places like Ohio, which was a swing state at the time. These ballot initiatives, because what they really do is they change the electorate.
Right.
And if you bring younger voters out, Biden benefits. Hard stop.
Yep.
You don't have to, just showing up is going to give Biden a better shot at carrying a state. That's why these ballot initiatives are so important to the Democrats.
I'll bring Vaughn back in on this point, because Vaughn, you and I have talked about this off camera. I know you are hot on this idea that the Trump campaign in particular, but Republicans in general, are not prepared to capture whatever enthusiasm may be left from their base on this issue.
Right. I think that this is the issue here, Garrett, where suddenly you're dealing with somebody who has made the case to a great share of the American electorate, many people who have deep moral convictions on this issue, opposed abortion, have been in their own right on the streets or the March to Life rallies around the country for the better part of decades now. And suddenly there are question marks about whether Donald Trump actually is the political figure that he purported to be, including during his White House years. Mike Pence himself is called to question the conservatism of Donald Trump. And we, Garrett, as a team, have reported on Donald Trump. He refers to himself less as a conservative these days, and instead it's us versus them mentality instead of conservative versus liberal. And this is where you see suddenly he says the Arizona law goes too far. And to Chuck's point, though, so okay, but he didn't comment on the imprisonment of abortion providers, 2 to 5 years. He said that he stands by the state's decisions. Well, the state of Arizona has made their choice, and now it's state legislators, like those folks in their local communities that neighbors know, who are the ones left in the crosshairs in these competitive Phoenix districts here. Suddenly there was a Republican legislator in the Paradise Valley area just outside of Phoenix who was the one that motioned to have this repealed, but other Republicans shot him down, and now it's going to be every single day ahead an attempt, a motion to overcome the local Speaker of the House in the Arizona House, thwarting an effort to repeal. It's complicated. It's much greater than Donald Trump. We're talking about local politics and abortion being the driving force here over the 7 months.
The Arizona State House, now the center of the political world in this election year. Vaughn, Dasha, Chuck, we'll leave it there on this conversation for now. Thank you all. And turning now to some breaking news on the economy, where it has been a sour day on Wall Street. Markets closed down more than 1% on the day after being roiled by disappointing inflation data. The Labor Department reported that consumer prices rose 3.5% last month compared to March of last year, fueling concerns that inflation isn't moving quickly enough towards the Federal Reserve's 2% target. What does all this mean? Well, it means the Fed will likely pump the brakes on its planned rate cuts, which is news that investors do not like because lower rates usually translate into greater economic activity. CNBC senior markets correspondent Bob Pisani joins me now. So, Bob, where did this inflation come from last month? What fueled it?
Well, as you mentioned, overall consumer price index was 3.5% year over year. That was stronger than the 3.4% expected. And Garrett, that got a very cool reception in the stock and bond market. The Dow Industrials were down about 1%, and Treasury bond yields were higher. So what happened here was there were particular increases in car insurance, for example, as well as health care. And I think everybody feels that as well. Shelter costs like rent also went up. The good news, if you look at the report, is that food costs are beginning to moderate, as well as gasoline prices. But even those prices are still going up, just not as fast as they were before. So the report's an improvement over a few years ago. Remember, inflation was 9% in mid-2022, but progress toward getting it lower has stalled out. That's the problem. It's been in the 3% range for about 9 months. The Federal Reserve has a target to get core inflation, that's ex-food and energy, to 2%. So we got a long ways to go to get to the Federal Reserve's target. The good news here, Garrett, and the reason the stock market's holding up pretty well is the economy is still strong. We got strong job growth. We got earnings still strong. And the stock market is holding up because of that. So with the economy strong and inflation still sticky, the Fed is not going to give the stock market what it wants, which is to lower interest rates. They're not going to do that right now. And that's what's been bothering the markets mainly today.
Yeah, bothering the markets, bothering a lot of folks out there looking to see if they can refinance their mortgages. And, everybody's sort of hung up and waiting on the answer to that question. Bob Pisani, thank you for being on top of it for us.
Thank you, Garrett.
And coming up, President Biden rebukes Prime Minister Netanyahu's handling of the war against Hamas again and urges Israel to call for a ceasefire now. Plus, as House Speaker Mike Johnson faces a threat to oust him, sources tell NBC News that Johnson is headed to Mar-a-Lago to meet with former President Trump and deliver remarks about the issue of election integrity. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. President Biden is once again publicly criticizing Prime Minister Netanyahu's handling of the Israel-Hamas war, the latest sign of the president's growing frustration with the Israeli leader. In a recent interview with Univision that aired last night, the president said what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza is, quote, a mistake, adding that he does not agree with the prime minister's approach. But today, during a joint press conference with the Prime Minister of Japan, President Biden emphasized America's commitment to Israel's defense. especially as Iran once again vowed to retaliate over the attack on its consulate in Syria. The president also reiterated his calls for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security. The new proposal on the table, Bill Burns led the effort for us. We're grateful for his work. There's a now up to Hamas. They need to move on the proposal that's been made. And as I said, we'll get these hostages home where they belong, but also bring back a 6-week ceasefire that we need now.
And joining me now is Hala Garani in Tel Aviv. And I'm also joined by retired 4-star General Joseph Votel. He's a former commander of U.S. Central Command and now a distinguished senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Hala, how is the Prime Minister reacting to these latest comments from President Biden, and how much are they already adding to this tension that has existed between the two men?
We haven't gotten an official response from the Prime Minister's office. We did ask, but we're hearing really essentially among ordinary Israelis, among the commentariat on Israeli news channels, this notion that there is certainly a rhetorical shift coming from the White House that was once again emphasized in this interview that was recorded. It has to be said before the President and Prime Minister Netanyahu had a phone call that was described as tense, in which President Biden once again reiterated that more needed to be done to get aid in. And in fact, we've noticed really a difference in how much the Israeli government is wanting to emphasize that it is changing its tack, for instance, on getting more aid in. We're getting truck numbers, for instance, 400 trucks a day, we're being told, over the last 2 days going into Gaza, as opposed to just a few hundred in the last few months. That being said, big aid crossings and important aid crossings in the north, like Erez, have not reopened as promised. So we're keeping our eye on that. But there certainly is a very different approach coming from the Israeli government as far as how it is handling not just the war itself, but the messaging about the war, Garrett.
And now we're hearing reports that a senior political leader of Hamas, as it says, his 3 sons were killed during an Israeli airstrike. What more do we know about that strike, and how much does that complicate potentially the ceasefire talks, which seem pretty well stalled at the moment?
Indeed, Garrett, this is the most senior political leader of Hamas. He's the leader of the Hamas's political faction exiled in Qatar. Hamas has confirmed that his 3 sons and 4 grandchildren were killed in an Israeli strike. His 3 sons, Amir, Mohammed, and Hazem. And the IDF, the Israeli military, has confirmed that they were killed as well, which makes them, at this stage since October 7th, the most senior Hamas operatives to have been killed in Gaza. So this is quite significant. Now, what Haniya is saying is that this will not soften the position of Hamas in any negotiations, and we're still keeping a very close eye on those ceasefire talks because they took place over the weekend in Cairo. There was a little bit of optimism early on that perhaps the two sides were nearing a deal, but now there are some questions around perhaps even Hamas's ability to produce the number of hostages that Israel is requesting. So still many open questions here in terms of how close we might be to a ceasefire deal that we're hearing time and again from President Biden is something the administration wants to see happen quickly. Garrett?
All right, Hala, thank you very much for that. I want to turn now to General Votel. And, General, I want to get your reaction at the start here to something that Israeli Minister Benny Gantz said yesterday. He said that from a military point of view, Hamas is defeated, but that the IDF will continue to operate in Gaza. So my question is 2 parts. Is this Israel trying to move the goalposts when it comes to their objectives in Gaza? And do you believe just even the sort of predicate part of that, the idea that Hamas is at this point militarily defeated?
Well, thanks. It's great to be with you, Garrett. So to Minister Gantz's comments, I mean, I think there's a variety of different assessments on this. My own personal view from having watched this is that certainly Hamas has been disrupted. They've been degraded. Their ability to launch major attacks into Israel has been significantly diminished. That said, they haven't been removed as a threat. There still are a lot of Hamas fighters. We see Hamas fighters going back into areas where Israeli forces are no longer located and perpetrating attacks or trying to establish control. So, yeah, I think there definitely has been some effect on Hamas, but it's as we've seen with terrorist organizations in our own experience, is that it's very, very difficult to get rid of all the fighters, all the ideology, and all the other trappings that come along with these organizations.
Right. You can't bomb an ideology necessarily. I want to talk about the potential for incursion into Rafah. The Prime Minister has indicated that there has been a date set for this. Obviously, there are still millions of civilians sheltering there in southern Gaza. What would you be looking for as signs that that offensive is imminent? And given the civilian impact, what kind of actions should we expect to see from Israel, or would we hope to see from Israel, to ensure the protection of those civilians before that next stage of this war begins?
Yeah, so as I've kind of watched the campaign here, I mean, I think we've seen a couple of important activities over the last few days. The repositioning of a large number of IDF forces out of the country, leaving a brigade behind right in the central part of the country, indicates to me that we're at a transition point here, that as they get ready to do operations down here, they may be looking at different approaches to this. And we've heard the discussion of more pinpointed, targeted operations, and so a brigade in the middle of the country provides kind of a jump-off point for the IDF to do that. So what I would be looking for is the nature of operations that Israel is conducting now. If they're conducting more pinpoint, deliberate strike operations, this will give us an indication of how the next phase of this is going to take place. We should also be looking at the communications. 1.2 million displaced Palestinians down this area. They have to be communicated with. That should be an indicator to us that the operation is approaching as well.
And then there's, of course, the potential next phase of all this, and that's this threatened Iranian retaliation for the bombing of that consulate in Syria. What is your view of sort of why we haven't seen that retaliation yet from Iran, which they keep promising, and what that might actually look like?
Well, I think we have to give credit to our adversaries that they are patient and they are going to choose the best opportunity for them to respond, not the timing which we would prefer. They do it. So I think Iran is being very deliberate here, is being patient, is trying to determine what the best way to respond to this. This clearly was a significant strike against this IRGC Quds Force leadership, and it no doubt dealt a blow to them. So I think a part of the reason we're seeing a little bit of delay is there has been a disruption of their leadership, and that's good. That buys some time, but as we know, Iran has a long memory, and they are likely to respond in some form and in some way in the future.
How much do you think the Israeli threat to respond directly to Tehran, directly to Iran, if something does happen, weighs on the calculus of Tehran and as they're trying to figure out what to do?
Well, I think it certainly has to be considered. I mean, they've not done that to date, but going after these IRGC Quds Force leaders in a diplomatic enclave in Damascus, I think is a pretty significant step, and is a very clear indication that Israel is prepared to take the necessary actions to defend themselves, and Iran has to take that seriously.
Do you expect what we'll see from Iran will be in the form of using their proxies, or is this going to be an Iranian strike under an Iranian flag, something that's sort of harder to deny on the world stage?
Well, we can see a variety of things. Iran's way of operating is through their proxies. They will fight to the last proxy. So I think we should expect to see the response principally coming through their proxy elements in the Red Sea, or in Iraq or Syria, or perhaps in Lebanon, or in Gaza as it is. So I definitely think it'll likely come through the proxy element.
All right, it's a complicated corner of the world. General Joseph Votel, we appreciate you walking us through it. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
And up next, we're headed to Capitol Hill, where Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene shows no sign of pulling back on her threat to oust the House Speaker after meeting with him for nearly an hour today. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. You're looking live at Capitol Hill, where House Speaker Mike Johnson has been huddling with his Republican conference for the second time today, this time to try to find a way forward after a failed vote tied to renewing the government's surveillance tools. This comes as he is facing the very real dilemma of how to do his job without losing his job. Earlier today, the Speaker met with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's threatened to oust him from his post, or at least to try, if he puts any bill on the floor that includes funding for Ukraine. Here was the Georgia Congresswoman after that meeting.
I did not give him a red line, and I have been very considerate of my conference, and I'm continuing to be considerate of my conference. He discussed having a kitchen cabinet group that would be a group of advisors for him. Asked me if I was interested, and I said I'll wait and see what his proposal is. On that, right now, he does not have my support, and I'm watching what happens with FISA and Ukraine. Those are the two things that we'll all be watching.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins me from America's most depressing hallway, just outside that Republican meeting room in the basement. Ali, let's start with that meeting before we go to this one. What more do we know about Speaker Johnson's meeting with Marjorie Taylor Greene? That sounded like a very Kevin McCarthy tactic. Come on in, I'll bring you on, I'll make you part of the team. Did it work?
It really did. Yeah, the parallels here are striking, not just starting with the fact that I am in the hallway of doom that we spent so much time in together at the end of last year when they were ousting then Speaker McCarthy. The fact that we could be here again with Johnson, I think, is not lost on the dozens of reporters and lawmakers who are in this hallway with me. But look, it did feel McCarthy-esque to have Johnson say to Greene, come on and let's be part of the conversation. Obviously, that worked for Kevin McCarthy. He was able to, for the tenure of his speakership, keep Marjorie Taylor Greene at bay. He had, of course, his other problems, but now it looks like MTG is going to be one of Johnson's big thorns. And today, I think it was striking to see she came out of that meeting, Garrett, and not only did she say, I'm watching closely what he's doing on Ukraine, because that was always true, she also now said, I'm watching what he's doing on FISA, which is the conversation that lawmakers are having in the room behind me right now. They've got no consensus there, but when Marjorie Taylor Greene is adding things that she could oust you over, I think that becomes a bigger problem.
Well, it certainly creates a better parallel to Matt Gaetz in the, Matt Gaetz versus Kevin McCarthy, right? Where it was sort of about the issue of the moment, but it was also about all of these other problems. If this one is really about Ukraine, where are we on the actual process of getting Ukraine aid to the floor? And who else besides Marjorie Taylor Greene could be part of the, problematic group for Johnson here?
Well, you've now got some people saying, especially after that failed rule vote earlier this afternoon, that's basically stopped House business in its tracks for today. Now you have other people saying that they're going to be looking at the way that the Speaker is handling the data privacy and national security issue of FISA, in addition to Ukraine. I mean, we just had the one-time Speaker, McHenry, walk by saying that the meeting in here is going. On Ukraine aid, though, there's no date for this. We've seen some lawmakers on the Republican side who want to see a vote on Ukraine say that they thought it was going to happen next week. I think that was my understanding, too, from my sources. Now we're hearing that because of the lag that we've seen today, Ukraine aid might get pushed even further down. It is once again a House that's pretty paralyzed by its own majority here.
All right, Ali Vitale, we've got to leave it there. Good luck in the hallway and for all of your future endeavors down there. All right, another day, another legal development tied to Donald Trump. This morning, former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg was sentenced to 5 months in jail after pleading guilty to 2 counts of perjury last month. Weisselberg pleaded guilty to lying in a deposition and in testimony during former President Trump's civil fraud trial. The 5-month sentence handed down was in line with Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's recommendation. Now, this is the second time Weisselberg will be placed behind bars. He served 100 days on a separate 5-month sentence last year after he pleaded guilty in 2022 to criminal tax fraud charges stemming from a 15-year scheme tied to the Trump Organization's business dealings. After the break, build a bridge and get over it. Why one former top Biden administration official reportedly says it's time for the president to stop focusing on infrastructure and get serious about inflation. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Kitchen table economic issues like the price of gas, housing, groceries are all back in the spotlight today after that hotter than expected inflation report. It comes as President Biden's former chief of staff is now openly questioning the president's messaging around economic issues and inflation specifically. According to Politico, Ron Klain told attendees at an event last night, quote, "I think the president is out there too much talking about bridges. He does 2 or 3 events a week where he's cutting a ribbon on a bridge. And here's a bridge. Like, if I tell you, if you go to the grocery store, you know, eggs and milk are expensive. I think it's kind of a fool's errand. I think it also doesn't get covered that much because, look, it's a blanking bridge. Like, it's a bridge. How interesting is a bridge? It's a little interesting, but it's not a lot interesting." All right, I'm joined now by my panel, who are all a lot interesting. Peter Baker, the New York Times chief White House correspondent and NBC News political analyst. Stephanie Murphy, former Democratic congresswoman from Florida. And Garrett Ventry, a Republican strategist. He's also an advisor to Kari Lake's Senate campaign. So, Peter, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you make of this? Is it really the smartest idea for the Biden campaign to take, let's say, Ron Klain's advice and start talking about inflation, an issue in which they have very little control now?
Yeah. The problem is that today's report, of course, is the worst possible timing, right? They needed there to be a continued momentum in the economy so they could make the case to Americans who are dubious that their economic picture is better, and this doesn't help them. And to hear Ron Klain out there talking about that indicates, I think, the frustration among Democrats of a president who isn't doing well in the polls, and everybody's looking for a way to change that. And it must be the communication. They must be saying the wrong thing. Let's try saying something else. So if you have a dinner party of 10 Democrats in Washington, you get 11 different strategies for how Biden should be taking it right now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So, Stephanie, I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when the infrastructure bill was one of the big accomplishments for President Biden, a big bipartisan accomplishment. Is this kind of the truism here that voters will say please, but they don't say thank you? Like, you have to basically move on, even though you're very proud of something like this?
Yeah, and at this point, the infrastructure and the roads and bridges are being claimed by both Republicans and Democrats. Yeah. Republicans are showing up for the ribbon cuttings as much as Democrats are. And I think it's hard for Biden to talk about inflation because what can he really say? And voters already think that Democrats aren't strong on the economy. So he would be talking about that. And I think it's also interesting that Ron Klain, when he was in the White House, was trying to convince the American people that inflation was transitory. And now he's saying we should be talking about it.
Oops, yeah. Garrett, the issue that most Democrats want to be talking about is the abortion issue. My colleague Peter Alexander asked the president about his message to Arizona voters today. Here's what the president said.
On the issue of abortion, sir, respectfully, what do you say to the people of Arizona right now who are witnessing a law go in place that dates back to the Civil War era?
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century, not back then. I weren't even a state. I find
that was a fastball over the plate, and the president kind of muffed it, basically, to combine my sports metaphors here. I mean, you know, obviously this is an issue that Democrats really like, but the president is perhaps not the most effective messenger on it. What do you make of that challenge for Democrats, and is that how Republicans, perhaps former President Trump, find an escape hatch here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at and I've told this to Republican candidates across the country the last year here, is if you look at the 2022 midterm elections, you had, you know, the economy, inflation, border, crime. Those are big issues. You had this undercurrent, though, after the Roe v. Wade ruling, where essentially this red wave did not actually happen. Democrats kept the chamber in the Senate. We had a slim majority, even a slimmer majority now in the House. And a lot of that was due to essentially not wanting to answer questions on abortion. So I think smart Republican candidates, I think President Trump was right to do this. I think Kari Lake, who I work with, was right to do this and come out and say, we don't support a federal abortion ban. We also think that this near total ban is essentially out of step with voters here. And so that you need to come up with something that you can agree on here. I do think leaving it up to the states, there's challenges to that as well here. But you have seen red states like Ohio, you know, want abortion access, even though it's a red state, and Kansas reject, attack on abortion rights. So it's clearly something, if Republicans are talking about abortion, it's not a great issue for us. We'd much rather be talking about the economy, inflation, and the border.
Is it a mistake, do you think, for Republicans to not try to seize something like a middle ground position, like basically where Roe was, and say, we'll take you to a 15-week or a 24-week ban? Like, the middle of the country is... The middle of the country is not satisfied with where their options are on this issue.
I think that's right. They don't want, late-term abortion, and they obviously don't want a near-total ban. And so the issue here on the 15 weeks is it is a -11 issue nationally. It is. That's Fox News polling, right?
Yeah.
This isn't, I'm not pulling out something that's not accurate here. And so the other part of it is it's a math game in the Senate, let alone the House. The House right now is having its own problems doing things, let alone, they can't pass a grilled cheese sandwich. You can't pass an abortion ban. So in the Senate, you're looking at this, and I've said this before, even to the president's team. If you run the table in Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, let's say you win New Mexico, you're at 58, 59 votes. You lose Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins off the bat. You lose Larry Hogan if he wins Maryland off the bat. You lose Carrie Lake, who's against a federal abortion ban as well. The numbers are also not there. So it's a deeply unpopular issue for Republicans. They need to essentially, in my opinion, say, that the American people do want some access to abortion here. There has to be some safeguards, and focus more on things like protecting IVF and those issues, which are actually popular and Republicans can lean in on.
Even Mike Johnson today was saying we have to start winning the argument here before we can start passing legislation. Stephanie, my question to you, I'm interested in the idea that there is this is not a purely partisan issue in the sense that there's a separation. It's not just Democrats are for abortion access, Republicans are against it. And we're seeing some movement that Pew did a good job of breaking down, this idea of how voter ID is changing in this country. Listen to this. In 2023, 49% of registered voters identified as Democrats or leaned towards the Democratic Party. 48% said they were Republicans. That's a big shift back from 2020 when it was Democrats 51, Republicans 46. How big of a red flag should that be for Democrats? And where do you think there's sort of the slippage here between the issues and the party ID?
I think one of the interesting things, it is a concern when we're losing an advantage. In Florida, it's a great example of that, where we just don't have the same voter registration advantage that we once had. But I think a big piece of that is young people are not choosing a party to be affiliated with. But we do know that when they show up at the polls, they tend to break for Democrats. So that's good. It just makes it really hard to predict what outcomes of elections are going to be looking purely at voter registration numbers. On this issue of abortion, I actually think it's good for Democrats, but I wouldn't over-index. And the reason it's good is that it's dividing the Republican Party. I mean, you heard Garrett basically say some people are going to do this and some are going to do that. And so it's really dividing the Republican Party, where it is a unifier for the Democratic Party.
That's
and
true.
Even if the president isn't comfortable talking about it, there are a lot of people who will be talking about it, who will be running campaign ads on it and mobilizing voters based on this and mobilizing Democratic voters. So I think it's a net positive.
Yeah, the more unified party tends to win these arguments. Peter, on that voter ID question, how much that is a reflection of President Biden and kind of where he's at in terms of his overall popularity and where we're at going into this election cycle?
Yeah, so Doug Sosna, who was the political director for President Bill Clinton, pointed out recently that, like, in almost all but one election in the modern times, the people have voted against the party in power. We're in a sour mood in this country. There is an anti-incumbent feeling. It has been now for a couple decades. If you go back, the wrong track number, which is the number of Americans who feel like the country is doing well versus not well, has been under 50% basically since the late second term of George W. Bush. We have not been satisfied with our leadership. And it's a polarized moment. So I think you're right. It's a reaction to Biden being in office, unhappiness over inflation, maybe the border, other issues like that the middle people are paying attention to.
It would be a throw the bums out election, except behind door number 2, more bums. I mean, that's the problem, right? You basically got 2 incumbents and people aren't happy with either of them. Garrett, they might try to throw the bums out in the House, though. I mean, Mike Johnson is once again potentially fighting for his life here with Marjorie Taylor Greene. What's your sense of the temperature inside the Republican conference right now, the willingness to have another speakership fight, or is this one member posturing and nobody rushing to save Mike Johnson?
Yeah, and I think she even said it was a productive meeting. She's not drawing a red line. I think that's a positive.
Matt Gaetz said that kind of thing for a while, too.
Yeah, I think it's a little different. They're a little more personal with him and the former speaker.
That's true.
But, I think if you take a step back, I mean, you're talking about he's got this, like, a very slim majority. We had a slim majority to begin with, and you had Gallagher and Buckley if you have even slimmer majority. And so I just don't know who else would be able to handle the job. You put anyone in that job here, you're talking about Republicans have always had concerns about FISA, especially they've been increased because of President Trump from 2016 on. On Ukraine aid, Republicans have soured on that in the House or even seeing that in the Senate. And then obviously President Trump, who is the leader of the Republican Party, is very not for Ukraine aid, I think to lightly say. And so I think, he's in a challenging position here. The question is, who else, and do you want another bitter speakership fight on the floor? I don't think many Republicans want that right now.
And we're going to see Mike Johnson at Mar-a-Lago publicly on Friday. I'm sure that's not a coincidental piece of timing. All right, we got to leave it there for now. Peter, Garrett, and Stephanie Murphy, thank you all for being with us. And still to come, reacting to the rollback in reproductive rights. I'll talk to a doctor in Florida about how the medical providers there are preparing for the state's new 6-week abortion ban set to take effect just weeks from now. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As lawmakers and activists in Arizona are deciding their next moves politically, doctors and patients in Florida are having to figure out their next moves medically, with the state's 6-week abortion ban set to take effect next month. The ban might not be in place for long. There is that proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot in November, which would allow abortion until about 24 weeks. But in the meantime, Florida's restrictive new law will effectively cut off abortion access for millions of women in the southern United States, with total or 6-week bans spanning basically every square foot of ground from Texas to South Carolina. Joining me now is Dr. Chelsea Daniels. She's staff physician at Planned Parenthood in Florida and a member of the Reproductive Freedom Task Force at the Committee to Protect Healthcare. So, Dr. Daniels, this 6-week ban will go into effect about 3 weeks now. What kind of preparations are you taking as a provider in advance of that deadline? What are you telling your patients?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and for making time for this just so important topic. It has been really kind of difficult conversations with patients on a daily basis. One thing that we are making sure to do is to see just absolutely as many patients as we can under the wire of May 1st, because we know that this is basic, necessary health care that people need regardless. So we are doing everything we can to see patients, to get them in for dating ultrasounds and directing them to care. A lot of the conversations I'm having with patients is just letting them know, hey, starting May 1st, this law has been enacted, and we want to get the word out there as much as possible for folks so that they can make the best decisions possible.
Are you seeing an uptick in patients? Are you expanding hours? Are you sort of trying to, keep the doors open as long as possible in the meantime?
Yes, we all of those things are true. We are working overtime. We are seeing as many patients as we can. We're increasing ultrasound slots in order to date patients to make sure that we are able to kind of effectively triage everyone. So just like when the 15-week ban was in place, we are really seeing as many patients as we can and making this a priority.
Something like 80,000 women got abortions in Florida last year. It's been one of the last places in the southern U.S. with what I guess you could consider a marginally less restrictive law. What will this change mean for access across the region broadly? Like, I'm a Texan, and I saw, we sort of watched as people started going to Colorado to get care. Where are women in Florida going to go once this law takes effect?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point. Last year in Florida, we did 80,000 abortions, and that was for mainly Floridians, but it has also served as a safety net for other folks in the South. Now, North Carolina, which is a 2.5-hour flight, would be the closest place that people can receive care. And it's only legal until 12 weeks in North Carolina. Beyond that would be Virginia or Maryland. So we're talking about asking patients to travel for a half a day if they're going to fly, or for days if they're going to drive, in order to receive what is just essential health care.
The great irony here is this more restrictive ban might also lead more voters to support this constitutional amendment. If that is the case, would you expect to see an even greater uptick in patients from other states? Were you seeing that before?
Yeah, so I think that as we've seen the Southeast just progressively become more and more restrictive, we did see numbers to Florida quadruple from out-of-state places after Dobbs initially fell. And I am extremely, extremely optimistic about our ballot initiative this November. And if we are able to say as Floridians and as voters, hey, this is basic health care that should be decided between patients and doctors, I hope that that echoes in the region and that we're able to serve patients not only in Florida, but in the Southeast as well.
I'm thinking about that map and the idea of getting to North Carolina. Talk to me about some of these more vulnerable communities when it comes to this 6-week ban. I mean, if you're in a more marginalized community, if you can't afford the car or the bus fare, you're really in trouble here.
Yeah, it's an unimaginable task. I actually lived in North Carolina last year and did the drive down to Miami, Florida when I moved myself. It was 15 hours. And if you don't have the ability to take the days off work, if you don't have the gas money, if you don't have the ability to fly yourself, if you need to arrange childcare, all for what should just be considered absolutely basic, essential health care.
All right, Dr. Daniels, we have to leave it there. Thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. And we'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.